Masechet Menahot Daf Yod Dalet, continuing from Yod Gimel Amud Bet, 8 lines in the bottom by the Gemara. Arav Huna. We're going to talk about Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef mentioned that if you slaughter one of two parts of components of a korban and you have pigul intention for the second half, he says that which you had intention is pagul, but the other one's not. Arguments Hachamim, Hachamim say both. Okay. Arav Huna. Omer Rabbi Yosef, you say. Pigul Yerech Shamin, he said pigul, if you had pigul intention on the right thigh of the animal, of the korban, and therefore the only pigul Yerech Shishmo is the left part, left thigh is not pigul. The Gemara says, my time, why? Now, why is that the case? Because why is only that the pigul, not the other half? Because I have logic and pasuk. Logically, the answer is lo adifun ma'ashum ma'aseh tuma. Intention of pigul is no different than the act of tuma itself. And therefore, if one limb of the korban, after separated, became tamid, other limbs wouldn't become tamid. Therefore, also regarding intention, pasuk proof is only from the part that becomes eaten from that specific limb, excludes a different limb. Okay. Here's a question. There's no karet. Unless it's pigul by both parts. Yani a pigul intention by at least a kizayit on both parts of the loaves. So if you had pigul intention regarding one loaf, the second loaf is not pigul. If you had both loaves intention, both of them are pigul. Even if you had intention of a single kizayit from both of them combined. Bishten in like only for both. But not one. Mani who's according to even says one won't be. Ella pshita Rabbi Yosef, we controversy. If you want to say that the animal is considered one big unit regarding to pigul, that's why they all become pigul. Mishum Hashim said that's why the lobes can combine. Ella Iyamar Tregu Fanino, but if you want to say that the thighs are considered two separate pieces, it means that how can you combine it? Where it says Hamani is according to Rabbi, he's going to be on the seat. It says someone slaughtered the first lamb of the Shavuot korbanot, intention to eat half a kizayit from one loaf for the wrong time. Then he has the second lamb, intention to eat a half a kizayit from the second loaf at the wrong time. Remember, it says, no bigul. The reason why it's pasu is not it's kasher because you only get a half and half. But if you say the kizayit from both, combining the pigul, Mr. would combine. That's the opinion. Where it says, Rabbi, Rabbi, according to whom is he teaching this braita? According to the Chachamim, even according to one of them, the laws will be pigul. The same question as before regarding the thighs. So who's the big according to? The Gemara says, that doesn't mean when we said earlier regarding both of them, doesn't mean he has to have a pigul on both loaves. Ella bishnehen, both lambs. Even one of the loaves become pigul. Argues against Rameir, who holds that pigul can be done through a partial, through an intention of a permission, partial of permitting factor. Therefore, it teaches you that not. It's not pigul unless the entire permitting factor had the intention on it. That's the case. What does it mean? The Brisa said it will never be pigul regarding both. If you want to tell me that it's referring to both loaves, both lambs, Yossi, according to Yossi, who says that one does not affect the other, therefore it's going to exclude Hamim and Rabbi Meir. How do you take a that's why it says never to exclude those cases. According to Hamim, to exclude Rabbi Meir, what do you mean never? It's not going to, it doesn't only stand on one. Therefore, how do we explain Rabbi Yossi? If Rabbi Yossi says that the wrong intention from one thigh does not make the other thigh pasul, pigul, like Rav Huna said, how can you say over here that one olive kizayit from each loaf can make pigul combined? Where it says, the Od Ha'amar Bevashem, Rashi also another question. Tashma bring the proof. Rabbi Meir says, Mishum Rabbi Yossi, in the name of Rabbi Yossi, Pigel b'davar na'aseh b'chutz. If you had intention of pigul regarding something that's supposed to be done outside the hechal, pigel is considered a pigul. B'davar na'aseh b'fnim is pigul within something to do inside. Lo pigel, no pigul. Okay, so how do you explain this case? Haya omed b'chutz v'amar. He's standing outside the hechal in the hatzer and he says, I'm having intention to sprinkle this blood after slaughtering it, but in the hechal tomorrow. Lo pigel, there's no pigul. Because that's the intention of doing something that's supposed to be done outside. It's something to put inside, you're having in mind to do outside. Another case. Maybe if it's inside, he said today, I'm sprinkling the blood in order to burn it on the outside tomorrow. To pour the blood outside tomorrow. Not big, again, because that's something inside for something outside. Maybe but if he's standing outside and he says, I'm slaughtering the korban in order to pour the blood tomorrow outside, which is where it's supposed to be, and now he's doing pigul wrong time. Look, they know how to burn the sacrificial parts tomorrow. Pigul, let's pigul. Because this is something outside the Eichel that is supposed to be done outside the Eichel. Let me see from here. The Bart says, according to Yossi, it would be pigul. Now, what do you mean, pour the extra blood the next day? How would that be pigul? I'm referring to the blood itself. That means that blood cannot become pigul. Time Mishnah says clearly. Again, soon, so keep it in mind. Following things are not going to become pigul if you eat it. Hakomet levana, komet levana v'minha, baktoret, minhad kohanim, minhad kohanim, minhad nisachim, adayishin kol minha, minhad kol mashiach, minhad kol mashiach, ba'adam in the blood. So there is no pigul for blood. The pigul, what happened to the meat? Over there where the guy did not have intention regarding the meat itself, except for just pouring the blood. Rabbi said pigul, and he still holds that the meat becomes pigul. Over here where he's actually having intention regarding the meat, the thighs. No, for sure the other thigh will get pigul. Another question is, Tashma bring a proof. We're picking on Ravuna. Someone that does kimitza or mincha and a korban, eat the remainder or burn the comments the next day. He would basically agree that here's pigul and there's karet. Now, regarding the comments the next day, what would that make pigul? Even if the comments, the comments itself, comments maybe but comments cannot become pigul, like saying Mishnah Batan, the make pigul by comments. So it can't be that. The extra blood. The remaining of the minha. Now over there, where the person did not have intention of pigul regarding the remaining of themselves, Mifagle says there's pigul. Over here, he's having intention for the actual korban by the thighs, again for sure. So how are you explaining over here? Where it says the pasuk is treating both loaves like a single piece, and also as two separate pieces. When they considered one, meaning that they both need to be brought, you can't bring one without the other. When is considered two? Torah says they have to do them separately, and that's why by pigul they're separate. If you combine them, meaning intention to eat both, because of them combined wrong time, they're also considered pigul. The Torah did consider them together. If you separated them, you have intention to eat them separately, it's also pigul. That's not exactly because Torah also considered them separately. So, but either way, it's considered pigul. What if the person had intention regarding pigul, regarding only one part of the bread of the korban to that? Right, there were 40 pieces of bread, types of bread, 40 sets of bread in the Todah korban, 10 times 4. 4 different styles, 10s of each. So, what if you did one category? The other 3 categories get pigul or not? The minhat ma'afama, what if you do minha, the cat pigul in regarding to baked minha? Other parts also become pigul or not? It's clearly, but it says yes. Okay. If someone at a time of slaughtering had intention to eat a half a kazayit of the korban at the wrong time. And at the time of throwing the blood, intention to eat a half a kazayit at the wrong time. Pigul is pigul. Because the intention for slaughtering and throwing the blood can combine for pigul. Some say only slaughtering and throwing because they are both considered permitting factors. But receiving and bringing the blood to the Nedav are not permitting factors, and therefore there's no pigul contentions they can combine. Some say the slaughtering and throwing, which are farther apart in time, because you have the walking and the catching in between. Still can combine for pigul. The walking and the and the receiving are much closer. And therefore, for sure, they could be cool. And is that true? They can combine. Vatani Reb Levi. Avdot in Mr. the Pigul. Four Avdot cannot combine for Pigul. Shechita, Zvika, Kalal Halacha. These four. How to be according to be, they can combine. How to run according they can combine. Tabar it says, Hashachet the Kevish, the whole Hatik Zait Mahalazo. Someone's throwing the first lamb of Shavuot to eat a half a Zait from the long time. And he similarly also slaughtered the second lamb, attention to eat the wrong time, the kazait, have a kazait. Rabbi Amer Anish is a kasher. Rabbi says that this is combined, and therefore we see Rabbi can combine half kazait. Rather, Rabbi says, in which mother Rabbi, when did Rabbi say you can combine? You can't combine. When it's half a permitting factor, like a kometz, and half a, like a, or throw in the blood, and half a eating. But over here, where it's talking about a case where it's an entire permitting factor and a half a eating factor, you can't combine. Right? So yeah, maybe you would agree if the case is talking about a case of a half a kazayit during slaughtering and a half a kazayit during the blood throwing, they would have combined. So again, how do we explain the Braita that had the question from another Braita? Bar Rav Hanan Labayet. Rabbi actually holds that two intentions regarding an entire permitting factor and a half eating can make pigul, like you said. Ligzor hatzi matir v'hatzi achila is also decree that in the case of two intentions regarding half a factor, a permitting factor, and half a consumption, should also be pasul. Atu kulo matir v'hatzi achila, because maybe it might lead to a case of an entire permitting factor and half a consumption. Why would he say that the half is pasul? Is that pasul? Where it says the Hara Yossi Gazar, because in the case of Yossi, he was the one who made the Gzeirah that the Pigul takes effect. Rabbanan Gazin, Hachamim also made a decree. Yossi Gazar, rid of Yossi made a Gzeirah. Tanam Mishnah says, La'atir levonatah mahar. If someone did the Kmitza with intention to burn it on the wrong day, Pasul says Pasul no karet. Hachamim say Pigul v'hayir no karet. Hachamim say there is karet. So we see that you're not to have you're being careful not to have a similar case by Pigu. We're not making it. Chaim also makes it out. The Talmud says Pigel bekomets levana. Someone intended to do Pigul during the burning of the komets, but not during the levana. But levana v'levakomets or Pigul during the levana, but not during the komets. Rabbi Meir Omer Pigul v'chayim karet. Rabbi Meir says there is Pigul and chayav karet. Chaim say in bo karet. I should Pigul bekom matir. Chaim say there's no karet unless you're having intention to Pigul during the entire permitting factor. Yani the komets levana. Therefore, we see over here, Chamim are the ones who are holding that if you eat this korban, you're not karet, but you shouldn't eat it in the first place. To make it Amalia says one second, Achiyashta, can you compare the cases from Rabbi Yosef to Chachamim? Bishamata makes sense according to the case that you just mentioned. Because why do you mention the case of the Kometz and Levanah? Because it might be he's guarding you from a case of the Komem Necha. Chachamim also making a case of Kometz, because he's guarding you for the sinner's mincha. And Chaim say a regular mincha is pasul if you did the wrong levana intentional people, because we're worried about a case of levana that comes lechem panim. So the case of the lambs of Shavuot, keves atul keves havira, because this one lamb is pasul because you were worried about the second lamb. Bezech atul bezech havira also regarding lechem panim, one spoon you pigo for second pigo. All these cases need safeguards. Allah acham, the case of Rabbi, where you're having the intention for half a volume, half of olive for one of two lambs. Can there be possibly the case where you're doing a half a pigul of a permitting factor and a half of a consumption? Which make an exira? Can't be. I can even prove it. That's the reason for the reason. Then I'm proving that Hachamim made this decree for this purpose. How? How am I proving it? The next part of the Mishnah says, Modin Hachamim Rabbi Meir b'minchat chotem minchat kanot. Hachamim will agree to the mayor in the case of the sinner's mincha or the mincha of a sotah, she'im pigil b'komets, that if you made the pigul by the komets, she'pigul b'hayan karet, it's pigul and karet. She'akomets hu matir, because the komets is the permitting factor in this case. Now, how why did he just speak? It's obvious, no? Because there is no other permitting factor regarding the sinner's mincha and the mincha of the sotah. Therefore, she automatically pasul, right? There's no levana there because we don't want to make it beautiful. Allah was teaching you the reason why that the komets is pasul is because you're having intention regarding the kometz itself. Because we're worried about the case of the kometz that the sinner's mincha, which is similar to the standard mincha, therefore the standard mincha we're making exra onto the sinners. So we see over here, having made a decree, specifically where there's because of similar cases that we're worried about.